Hello guys, welcome back to Hollywood Recapped. Today I will give you a comedy, fantasy, horror movie titled Dark Shadows, released in the year 2014. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Movie starts in the year 1760, where the Collins family leaves Liverpool and sails to Maine, New England, to expand the family empire. They start a successful fishing business that allows them to establish the town of Collinsport and their own grand estate, Collinwood. Even their money grows, though the owner makes sure that his son, Barnabas Collins, is raised knowing that family always comes first. 15 years later, Barnabas becomes a youth and has an affair with one of the family's servants, Angelique, who is also a witch. But when she asks Barnabas for his love and not his body, then Barnabas tells her that he doesn't feel that way about her. So she decides to revenge. She casts a spell and kills his parents. Barnabas suspects a dark magic caused such an accident. And so he starts to investigate the dark art. And then he begins a relationship with Gisette Dupress. Angelique overhears the two, coveting their love for each other, and she gets jealous. And so she uses her magic again to make Gisette jump off a cliff. And unable to save her in time, Barnabas too jumps after her, but unlike Gisette, he tends to survive the fall because Angelique has cursed him to become a vampire, so his suffering may never end. After this, she gathers an angry mob of townspeople and turns them against Barnabas by pointing out that he's a monster. And altogether the crowd catches him and lock him inside a coffin, and they then bury in the forest. 200 years later, in the year 1972, Victoria Winters is on a train to ride to Collinsport because she has seen an ad from the Collins family looking for a governess. Victoria isn't her real name, but she's running away from her home and doesn't want people to know her real identity. So chooses the name Victoria from a poster on the train. Then, when she arrives at the estate, she's received by Willie Loomis, the caretaker, who explains that the mansion, which isn't in a good condition in present day, needs to have service of at least 100 servants. But it's just him and Mrs. Johnson. And at that moment only, Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, the family matriarch, shows up and speaks privately to Victoria and explains the job to her. After mentioning that it's just 7 people in the house including the employees, and there are areas of the mansion they don't use anymore. Now Elizabeth asks her some questions that Victoria answers with a healthy amount of sass. And which Elizabeth appreciates and gives a consent of hiring her. Later at dinner, we see Victoria meeting the rest of the family. There is Elizabeth's brother Roger Collins, who is a loafer, Elizabeth's teen daughter Carolyn Stoddard, who is going through a rebellious phase, Roger's son David Collins, who isn't doing well after his mother died when he was 5 and he thinks that he can see her ghost, and Dr. Julia Hoffman, a psychiatrist hired to deal with David's psychic issues, but then she spends most of her time drunk. Victoria sympathizes with David and tells him that she too believes in ghosts, by which Elizabeth doesn't take it well. After few moments, when Victoria gets ready for bed, she sees Gisette's ghost in the hallway. And the ghost tells her he's coming before going to the foyer and circling the chandelier a couple of times, and after repeating he's coming, she falls the same way she did that day, 200 years ago on the cliff and disappears. Meanwhile, in the forest, a construction crew is building a McDonald's or doing some digging, and then finds Barnabas's coffin. They open it to see what is inside, but now, he is free. Then Barnabas proceeds to feed on every single worker, and also apologizing for his decades-old hunger. After this, he makes his way to the mansion on foot. He observes but gets confused by all the technology of today and modern clothing on the way, well covered in blood. When he makes it to the estate, he finds Willie in the garden and hypnotizes him with his vampire powers to give him the information that he needs. He also then asks him to clean him up before taking him inside. But while he is trying to introduce himself to the children, Elizabeth interrupts in between and asks him to talk in private, expressing her suspicions of his identity. And saying all the magical myths surrounding the family are just fairy tales. Barnabas proves that he's telling the truth by opening a secret room that not even Elizabeth knew about, and he promises to bring back the family's glory with all hidden treasure from that room. Elizabeth agrees to accept him back in the family, but under one condition, that he shouldn't tell anyone that he's a vampire. The following day, during breakfast, Elizabeth introduces him to others as Barnabas III, a distant relative from England. The family begins talking business, and they tell to Barnabas that the Collins fishing empire is gone, now the entire area is ruled by Angel Bay Seafood. At this moment, Victoria enters the room, and then Barnabas can't help himself, flirting with her. Because she looks so much like Gisette. Now we see in town that Angelique is still alive under the name Angie Bouchard, and she is now the powerful founder and CEO of Angel Bay Seafood. When her employees tell her about the accident in the forest, she goes there to see it with her own eyes, and she is shocked to find out the open coffin. And without wasting any time, she quickly drives to Collinwood, where she exchanges some insults with Elizabeth before Barnabas takes her away to talk in private. As soon as he closes the door, Behind him, Angelique kisses him, then tells him that Collinsport is now her angel bay. Thanks to the fishing business, she started on purpose to ruin the Collins. The townspeople respect her as their leader, and now they've forgotten all about him. So nobody is going to believe him anyway. After Angelique leaves, Barnabas expresses his fears to Elizabeth, and she reminds him that no matter what has happened to him in the past, he always fought on with such a determination that they had to put him away in a box. His family needs him now, so he should fight for them, in the present too. Inspired by her words, Barnabas begins putting all his energy into bringing glory back to the Collins. And by selling some of the treasure from the hidden room, he hires dozens of people to renovate the mansion and rebuilds their fishing company. He, with the help of an umbrella, sunglasses, and a hat, manages to get out during the daytime without the sun burning him, but then he has trouble finding a spot to sleep comfortably, so he brings his old coffin there. When the company starts running smoothly, then only Barnabas hires fishermen by hypnotizing the captains working for Angelique and making them change their sides. In his free time, he continues to learn about the technologies and spends time with Victoria. One evening, Roger sees him getting out of the secret room with treasure in his hands. And Barnabas is found by Julia, who thinks he acts very weird and invites him to her office. She hypnotizes him and gets him to reveal his secret, and then she leaves him behind to go and yell at Elizabeth for having kept the secret from them. Elizabeth convinces her not to go to the police, and she points out that Julia should be fascinated by him. So she wants him to stay and learn more about him. Later sometimes, Barnabas asks Carolyn for advice on how to court modern women. Then Carolyn tells him that he needs to drop all the old-time attitude and hang out with cool people. And so Barnabas ends up hanging in a hippie circle, sharing stories, smoking in the forest. And when the girls teach him that women want love and not the money, then Barnabas kills them all, and to feed them. The subsequent day, Julia starts to give him blood transfusions and to see if that can cure his vampirism. When Barnabas compliments her, then Julia reminds him of the doctor-patient confidentiality concept and gets on her knees to pleasure him. While Victoria and Barnabas continue to spend quality time together and bond over talks about the supernatural. On the other hand, Angelique is furious that the Collins company is being successful again. The board members don't understand what the big deal is, because then Angel Bay still reigns over 95% of the nets, but Angelique explains it's a matter of pride and to carry on what her grandmother has started. A way to destroy the Collins family. She calls Barnabas to have a meeting with her, and she offers him the opportunity to sell his company to her, but he refuses. Angelique reminds him that she only wants his love and then threatens to kill Victoria if he doesn't give it to her. Barnabas gives in and makes wild love to her and all over the office, destroying most of it as they go. After they're done with this, then he realizes it was a mistake and tells her that he can't be with her. Listening to this, Angelique promises to destroy him. Barnabas continues to see Julia for blood transfusions, while Victoria begins having dreams of the time when she saw Josette's ghost as a child when her parents sent her to an asylum for it. And when she wakes up, she finds Josette's ghost visiting her again, asking for her help before disappearing. In the morning, while having breakfast, Barnabas announces that he wants to throw a ball for the whole town to remind them who is the ruling family here. Then Carolyn tells to him that nowadays people throw happenings, not balls, and she gives him some tips about the modern parties. When the night of the ball comes, she finds that he hadn't been joking when he says he would get anything she mentions, and now Alice Cooper is playing live at their party. Because he isn't a fan of the music, Barnabas leaves to take a walk around the house and locates David taking care of the coat room instead of the employees. Because his dad has asked him to take over for a moment and not let anyone get inside. Barnabas sends him away and climbs the outside wall to peek through the window, and he finds that Roger is getting intimate with the employee and stealing wallets from people's coats. Afterward, he meets with Victoria on a balcony where she tells him that she knows about his feelings for her. She senses like she can tell him anything and that she has known him forever and confesses she has always felt something pulling her to Collinswood. When he tries to kiss her, she unconsciously pulls back because this is the first time that someone she loves her back, and she starts telling him her story. Victoria spent many years in the asylum with only doctors and Josette's ghost as company. She has been put through dozens of painful treatments for her treatment. But she never gave up her will, and one day she managed to escape through a window. While she was searching for some place to go, then only Josette pointed at the governess ad in the newspaper, and she knew what she had to do. She feels at home at Collinswood, and she has developed feelings for Barnabas too. Which she expresses by finally kissing him. This is then seen by Angelique, who just arrived at the party, and now she's very much furious. And the next day, Barnabas visits Julia to double the efforts on making him human. So that he can be with Victoria. Then only he finds her transfusing his vampire blood into her body. She has never been interested in him becoming human, but she only wants to make herself immortal. As a punishment for breaking the family's trust, he bites her and kills her, but not noticing her fangs growing. After this, he asks Willie to take him on the boat in the middle of the sea to drop her body there with a brick. Next, he finds out Roger trying to access the secret room for the treasure, so he decides to give him a choice. Either he can start becoming a better father to David, or he can take some money, and Barnabas will give him and leave to never be seen again. Roger chooses the money and leaves the estate, breaking David's heart. When the kid runs to his room, he almost gets hit by the disco ball, which Willie is disconnecting from the ceiling. Just then Barnabas uses his super speed to save him and ends up under the sunlight, which begins lighting him on fire. And now the whole family comes to know his secret. David and Victoria run away from him in disgust. Getting desperate, Barnabas goes to see Angelique, who refuses to remove the curse and gets him to admit that he had killed Julia. She makes a proposal that they can rule the fishing empire together as partners and lovers, or else she'll put him back in the box. Barnabas tells her to go to hell and tries to leave, but then her employees are waiting on the other side of the door with a coffin that Angelique pushes him into. After closing it with chains, they all put the box in a van and drive to the cemetery. But only after Angelique uses a spell to make the Collins Company building explode. The coffin is then abandoned in a mausoleum, only to be found by David some moments later, who came to know about Barnabas being in danger. Because the ghost of his mother told him that. Now back in town, people are watching how the police and the firemen are taking care of the fire. Then Angelique shows up there and plays a recording of Barnabas admitting that he killed Julia, using it to rage the town against the Collins. The angry mob, together with the cops and Angelique, arrive at Collinswood, and right after that Barnabas gets there too. He's willing to confess if they don't hurt his family, but take Angelique with him as well. The sheriff then tries to shoot Barnabas, but it does not harm him. So he proceeds to bite Angelique and make her skin crack in order to show the crowd that she's a monster too. As the sheriff sends all the people away, Barnabas begins fighting against Angelique with the help of Elizabeth's shotgun and Carolyn, who then reveals herself to be a werewolf. But sadly, they prove to be no match for a witch's powers, especially when Angelique enchants the house to attack its own family. As she tortures them, she confesses that she was the one who killed Barnabas's parents, David's mother, and also sent a werewolf to bite Carolyn in her crib. And she has always been the curse behind the family's misery. Then David shows up and sends his mother's ghost against Angelique, throwing her across the room and making her crash against a chandelier, which then drops down to the floor and kills her. And the family leaves the house, which is now on fire. Barnabas gives Angelique a last goodbye, and the witch dies after ripping her heart out of her chest and giving it to him. But then it only becomes dust. Now Barnabas can't find Victoria anywhere, and David's mom tells them that she's at the cliff. As the family watches the house crumble, Barnabas races to stop Victoria from jumping, but she doesn't listen to him because she's just a human that lives in the light, while Barnabas will live in the shadows forever. So they can't be together. This depressing thought makes Victoria jump, and like it happened years ago. Then Barnabas jumps after her, but this time, he bites her in time to transform her into a vampire before she hits the ground. Now she's an immortal being like him, and they can be together forever. The couple then shares a kiss. Now we see in the bottom of the ocean, where Julian's body opens her eyes, revealing she's become a vampire too. And the movie ends here. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below which movie should I recap next.